I'm Martin Taylor and I'm the City Archivist and I'm one of the managers here at the Hull History Centre. The first exhibition that we here at the History Centre are hosting for 2017 is Hull Charters. We've chosen to focus on one of the most iconic collections of documents in our custody, the City Charters. Everybody knows that the first charter, Hull's birth certificate if you like, dates from 1299 when King Edward I started the process by which Hull turned itself into a self-governing community. But we have 40 charters and they represent something key in the city's history. We want to use them to tell some of the story of the city. So we begin before 1299, going back to the late 12th, early 13th century, when a small settlement called Wyke upon Hull grew up at the junction of the River Hull and the Humber Estuary on land owned by Mewkes Abbey. Now Mewkes was a Cistercian foundation. The Cistercian order of monks was a multinational company involved in exporting wool. Mewkes wanted its own port to transship wool coming downriver from the Humber Basin onto ocean-going vessels for export to the Low Countries. And the mouth of the River Hull, a deep water anchorage, was ideal for those purposes. Prosperity followed. To the extent that it attracted the attention of one of England's most acquisitive and ruthless kings, Edward I. And Edward took shameless advantage of the financial constraints in which Mewkes Abbey found itself and bought Hull, Wyke as it was then, from the monks of Mewkes Abbey. It really was an offer they could not refuse. And once Edward had acquired the port, partly perhaps as a supply base for his incessant wars in Scotland, but in my view more likely as a cash cow, a tax base. He wanted to exploit customs on the wool going out of Hull. Once he'd acquired this settlement, this port, he began the process of setting it up as a self-governing community and granted it a charter, the 1299 charter, which created the settlement that he had newly renamed Kingston upon Hull. We know it now as Hull, of course. He created Kingston upon Hull a free borough. That gave the town and the people who lived here a certain status. It was easier for them to trade in this country and overseas. They had an element of self-government, and it really was the beginning of a process towards the city that we know today. It shouldn't be thought, though, it was an inevitable process. On the same day that Hull was given free borough status, the 1st of April 1299, the neighbouring port of Ravensor-Odd, which occupied shifting sands on the site of Spurn Point, was also created a free borough. Hull survives today. Ravensor, I'm afraid, was washed into the sea about 50 years later, and so we benefited from Ravensor's disappearance. But over the period, Hull prospered, declined, prospered again, but always the people of Hull conducted a relationship with central government. Over time, the people of Hull obtained, bought on some occasions, increased rights, increased privileges to break away from the local authority of the king, as represented by the Sheriff of Yorkshire, to become a self-governing community, a group of people who could run the place in their own interests and for the benefit of their own bank balances, to be honest. In 1331, for instance, Edward III gave Hull the right to elect its own mayor. The 15th century was a particularly good time for Hull. The Delapole family, a local family of merchants made very good indeed, obtained government office, obtained titles, and became Hull's friends at the court of King Henry VI. And so we have a number of charters representing grants by Henry to Hull. Hull was created a county of itself, for instance, a unitary authority, as we'd say these days, making it completely independent of Yorkshire. And civic splendour was obtained from Henry VI. Henry VI granted the mayor the right to have a sword of state carried in front of him on important occasions, and the aldermen, the equivalent of our local councillors, to wear nice robes. In the Middle Ages, when status was expressed through ceremonial, through display, through costume, this was very important, and it was a great privilege for Hull as a town, as a borough, to have such a status. The people of Hull were able to exploit the relationship between their local aristocrats, the Delapole family, the Duke of Suffolk, with Henry VI. So loyal was Hull to the Lancastrian King Henry that on one occasion it did send a small group of troops led by the mayor to fight for Henry during the Wars of the Roses, but unfortunately the mayor was killed in battle. Probably one of the few occasions where a serving mayor has suffered that particular fate. In the exhibition here, we've only been able to show the originals of 4 or 5 of the charters, which is only at 10% of the whole collection. But the exhibition that you can see behind me covers the whole range. It was generally the case that whenever there was a new monarch, whenever there was a regime change, existing privileges were confirmed by charter and new ones sought. The people of Hull often put a sob story to central government. In Elizabeth I's reign, they told the Crown that the sea defences were in a poor state of repair, so could we have some financial privileges to enable us to repair them, please? On 2 occasions, one in 1532, I think, we have the accounts of money dispersed by the City Council, by the Mayor and Aldermen, in order to obtain a charter. And there is a wonderful series of accounts relating to the expenses of one of Hull's aldermen down in London to obtain a charter from King Henry VIII. And this includes such expenditure as the cost of a sturgeon as a present to Henry's notorious minister Thomas Cromwell, small bribes to get past his doorkeepers, and even the amounts of money that it cost to have the charter written, to have it sealed, to have a nice silk. The charters continued to be the way the town was run, to provide the framework for local government, right up until 1835. One of the last charters that we have is the 1662 one, the governing charter of Charles II, and that was the framework for which the city was run until 1835. But we do have some more modern ones. The recent revivals of the posts of Sheriff and High Steward of Hull were done through letters patent, the modern equivalent of charters from the current Queen. And we take the story right from 1299, if not before, right up until the present day in our exhibition. The charters, I think, are important, though, not so much for what they say as for what they are. They represent something fundamental in the history of our city. They are the bedrock, the framework, the legal underpinning of the city, of the community. They detail rights and privileges enjoyed by the citizens of Hull in the 13th and 14th centuries, yes, but they lead inevitably to the rights and privileges and our understanding of our responsibilities as citizens today. For that reason, they are important, they are icons, and I hope that, that as many people as possible will visit the History Centre to see our exhibition. The exhibition is on until the 24th of February, and the History Centre is open to the public Tuesdays to Fridays, 9:30 to 5:30, and on the first and third Saturday of each month.